It's Rhythm and Soul Radio. I am Marco Nobles. We have our virtual studio. Excuse me. Let me do that again. It's Rhythm and Soul Radio. I am Marco Nobles. We have our virtual studio open, and I am joined in the virtual studio by veteran music executive. He's also on the board of the Hip Hop Museum. He is also one of the persons who runs Lehman College Center for the Arts, Mark Money Green. He's now an author. Author of the new book, The Show Must Go On. How you doing, sir?
Well, thank you, Marco. Thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure and an honor. So let's talk. It seems like you were always destined to be in the music business. As I saw you lived down the street from Sylvie Robinson. Yep. You knew the Osley Brothers growing up. You knew a number of other artists. You actually played music growing up. So was it always, music has always been in your blood?
Always in my blood. From the time I could remember, that's all I wanted to do. Something in music.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as you kind of, I guess you started playing music as a kid, but as you got older, what was it that said, okay, because you were also a DJ. So was it the DJ thing? You said, okay, this is my lane into music?
Well, Marco, what happened was probably around the 8th grade, I realized what I wanted to do. And I said, you know what, I started taking drum lessons and piano lessons. And one day I met this guy that lived around my block named Freddie Williams, and he was taking guitar lessons. So we talked about forming a band. So probably later on that year, we started a band. I went by his house to actually meet his parents. When I got there, I saw all these gold and platinum albums on the wall. I was like, wow, what is this? And I looked closely. It said, the Jackson 5, I Want You Back, Stop and Love You, Save, and ABC. I was like, where did you get those from? And he's like, oh, my uncle, he's a producer, and he wrote and produced those records. So right then and there, I met my best friend. We started a band. And by 1976, our band disbanded. And that's around the time that the disco era was coming up. So I had all the equipment in my house, and I decided, let me try hooking up my turntables to this equipment and see what happens. And then before you knew it, my DJ life was born.
You start doing that, and then lots of folks in music, you kind of DJing does become a lane into the industry, so to speak. You start DJing and you start producing, or you work with an MC, and you become a group or what have you. You ended up kind of on the business lane, and you've worked with some of everybody. So what was it about DJing that taught you, or that kind of showed you different avenues to move, to kind of always be prepared to go to that next level?
Well, DJing was the next best thing from being in the band, because again, the disco era and everybody wanted to be a DJ. So by 1977, I was in high school. I was a junior, and I was DJing in some small clubs and small, project rec centers in the neighborhood. And I was approached by a promoter who asked me to be in the Battle of the DJs in the Bronx. And it was during that time that I first heard rapping. So I took what I learned that night in the Bronx. I brought it back to New Jersey. I started DJing parties. And that weekend, a high school friend of mine by the name of Guy O'Brien came to me and said, Mark, what are you doing? What is that? And I said, it's called rapping. That's what they're doing in the Bronx. And before you knew it, I went to college by 1978. And he called me up and said, listen, Mark, we're making a record. I said, what are you talking about, we? He said, yeah, I got my DJ crew. We were making a record. And the first record they made was called Rapper's Delight. And he was called Master G. So that was kind of my introduction in the whole DJing and rapping thing.
Right. So now, getting kind of deep in the business, in the record industry, because you went from, working with labels to then, working shows and events with, some of everybody, whether it's DJ Jazzy Jeff and the First Prince, or Chaka Khan or Usher or Prince, who's like my favorite artist of all time. How does how you know it's and the record industry is so transient, I guess is the best way to put it. So how do you kind of, as you go along, how do you figure out how to keep yourself in the spaces and still keep yourself happy?
Well, Marco, what I did, like I'm a planner, so everything I did was kind of planned out. Once I got to college, I met Melba Moore and Philip.
Mm.
Both of them gave me their numbers. So Melba said, "Call me when you get out of school." And I called her probably a year later, and I started working for Hush Productions. And it was during that time was my first actually entry into the music industry. I worked at Hush for a couple years, and then I started working with an agent during the time I was on the road. And I said, man, I want to be an agent. So I started working as an agent. That's when I signed Will Smith and Jazzy Jeff, Fresh Prince, and Kid and Play, and Salt-N-Pepa. And during along that time, I ended up deciding I want to go into the record business. So by 1989, I was in the record business.
Right. It's Rhythm and Soul Radio. We are talking with veteran music executive and now author Mark Money Green. The book is The Show Must Go On. Why was now the time to write the book?
Whew. Well, what happened was I think Master G started doing interviews, and then he really, I guess, after all these years, he decided to say that I was the person who introduced him to hip hop. And
Mm-hmm.
at that time, I was still posting a lot of photos and pictures with me with people I was working with, and I said, you know what? Everybody seems to not understand what I do. Some people think I'm a promoter. Some think I'm a manager. So I wanted to tell my story, and my story was basically my life getting into the business and all the people I work with and all the crazy stories that you're going to read in this book, called The Show Must Go On. And I wanted to really inspire others that are interested in getting in this business. I wanted to show them what it was like and to learn from everything that I learned, from the ups, the downs, the trials and tribulations. And at the end, I'm just hoping to inspire others by sharing these lessons of working with these incredible legends that I've worked with, and also to talk about the incredible stories that's in the book.
So, a lot of times people, uh, on the one hand, there's the fame and glamour of being in the music industry that people see or think there is there, and on the other hand, there are people who say this is not an industry that you want to be in. Which side do you fall on? Do you discourage people? I don't think you're doing so in the book, but when people come to you and say, hey, how do I get in the music business? Do you say, oh, I don't know if you want to do that based on everything that you've seen and been through?
No, I tell everybody, what is your passion? See, my passion was music. And, you have to find your passion in order to decide on what's going to work for you. Some people just want to get in for the money and the fame, and it's not going to last for them. I found my passion, and because of that, I was able to reinvent myself every time I was out of work, because I wanted to learn everything about this business. I wanted to find out not only the people before me, but the people that's coming after me as well. I wanted to learn everything about this business. So I guess my story to them is to find your passion. And I don't discourage anybody, because a lot of people used to think because I'm laid back and kind of quiet that, how can you be in this business? This is a custom. But if you learn the game, you don't have to worry about any of that, because you know what's going on. You know what's up.
Right, right. So you mentioned something as I just had this conversation with Kindred the Family Soul about the importance of reinventing yourself. We talked about it from an artist perspective, but you're talking about it from a record executive perspective. Talk a
Yeah.
little bit more about the importance of reinventing yourself in the music industry.
Oh yeah, it's one thing to learn your job that you're doing, but you need to learn the other jobs that kind of correspond with what you do. Like when I was in sales, I had to learn marketing. When I was doing marketing, I wanted to learn promotions. When I was doing promotions, I wanted to learn, publicity. So everything goes hand in hand, and that's why I was able to continue to reinvent myself, because when I was out of work as a record executive, I went back to being an agent. When I was out of work as an agent, I went back to doing marketing promotions and independent. So if as long as you have the passion and the desire to learn about your business, you'll always have a job.
The show business term is the show must go on.
Yes.
In a way, based on what you just said, that seems to be how you functioned. For you, the show must go on. So was it that easy to come up with the title of the book?
No, I just had to think about all the trials and tribulations I went through. And you'll see, I mean, there's times when I was out of work and I had to do menial jobs. And there's time when I got back in, but I wasn't getting paid the amount of money I should get paid. But I just kept persevering. I just kept pushing. And eventually everything turned around for me, I mean, I'm happy and blessed to say that, not only do I have this business, that I'm still utilizing my talents as an executive associated director at the Lehman Center. I'm still utilizing my talents working with the museum. So everything is basically knowledge and learning and just trying to gain all you can.
Before I let you go, I'm going to ask you for two stories, whether they're in the book or not, so you can share. One story I'm going to ask to share is, one of the most interesting, I'll say, stories you've run across in your years in the business. And then I'll ask for the second story after that.
Whew. Well, I want to talk about a couple of stories in the book because there was just so many crazy things that I experienced in the book. I talk about, I came up in the 80s. It was back then, there was a lot of drugs, and I call it the Scarface era. And in the book, I talk about how one day we're on the road and we're traveling through the Blue Ridge Mountains and everybody's sleeping. And I feel the bus swerving back and forth. I'm like, what is going on? So I go back, I go to the front of the bus, I pull back the curtain. And lo and behold, the bus driver is there with a crack pipe trying to smoke while he's driving through the mountains. I won't tell you what happened. You got to read the book.
Well, yeah, that's definitely a great opportunity to read in the book. Huh? I can only imagine what the rest of that story might have been like. But thankfully, you're still here to tell us about the story.
I'm there. There's another story I talk about in the book with me and Montel Jordan. We went to Brazil, not knowing who we were performing for. When we got there, we saw these 3 blacked out SUVs. And I'm like, hey, who is this? And who's this lady? Come to find out, she was the wife of the mafioso boss of Brazil.
Oh, wow.
So
but the show must go on, right?
The show must go on. I mean, there was so many crazy things that happened that night. I mean, I remember she asking us, do you want to see, the city of Brazil? And I was like, yeah, I figured we're going to jump in the car. No, she had us walk to the top of the hill and there was a helicopter there waiting for us. So she took us to tour Brazil in a helicopter.
Wow.
We went to the club that night and the bodyguards, it was crazy because that night we went to the club, we had 6 bodyguards and they were all, wherever we went, they followed. But when we got to the club, the first thing they did was go right to the coat check, pull out the 9mm and check them at the coat check.
They were making sure you were protected.
Yeah, man, there's so many crazy stories in this book. I talk about the people I work with: Usher, Timbaland, Missy Elliott, Aaliyah, Tina Marie, Freddie Jackson, Melba Moore. There's DMX, there's CeeLo Green. And I just go on and on talking about all these people and the crazy things that happen while working with them and how I involved in this.
Right. So that leads me to my question that I gotta ask. I gotta get a Prince story. Like I said, Prince is my all-time favorite artist, all-time favorites of all of us here at Rhythm and Soul Radio. So gotta ask about a Prince story. You can like give the entree into how you ended up working with Prince and then and an all-time Prince story.
Yeah, so a friend of mine named Keith Ingram had called me and said this guy named Londell McMillan, who was Prince's attorney, looking for somebody to put the distribution company together for Prince. And at that time, Prince was independent. He wanted to just own everything, his masters. He wanted to own his own distribution company. So I was hired as the general manager to put that company together. And my first time I went to meet Prince, we flew there, first class, me and one of the attorneys from the law firm. And the crazy thing was, is we were sitting in a meeting. So there's Prince and his attorney there, and it's me and the lawyer. So every time I would ask Prince a question, he wouldn't answer it directly. He would whisper into the lawyer's ear, and the lawyer would ask me the question.
Wow. So that's almost like the myth of don't look him in the eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was kind of weird for me. But at the end, we talked. He showed me around Paisley Park. At that time, he was the symbol. I didn't know what to call him. I just called him Sir. But I won't go into the rest of it. You got to read the book.
Yeah, that's in the book too. That's also another reason to go into the book. I've been to Paisley Park. That was like, I ended up going right after the pandemic, so it was it's kind of like going. It's the holy grail for us Prince fans. So
right,
and to be able to have a tour from him, I can imagine what that was like.
Yes, exactly.
And I can imagine the rest of the book is amazing. The book is The Show Must Go On, Mark Money Green. It is available now everywhere. You can get it, digitally. I'm sure online, all the regular places that you get your books online these days.
Yes, so Barnes and Nobles. You can get it at Amazon, or you can go to my website, markmoneygreen.com.
Excellent. Mark, thank you very much for taking the time and sharing a little bit with us, sharing a little bit of your history, because you are certainly, historic, things you've seen, the things you've done, and glad that you were able to put it in a book so that, many of us and those future generations can get a little glimpse of what this music business is built on and the foundation that you and others have laid.
Yes, absolutely. I thank you so much, Marco.
Thank you. It's Rhythm and Soul Radio.